Hello. So I had a discussion, a really good discussion with a local client just yesterday, and in it I mentioned a number of things, shared some information, and this time to do with playwright tests. So I thought I'd summarize this in a video now. I have some notes here that I'll display on the screen over here, so you can kind of see what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, what the options are for playwright tests. Folks probably know this, but this is kind of a refresher. You can manually code them, obviously. You could use the recorder, what I'm going to show. I think that's pretty typical, or use AI. This is the thing that's kind of interesting. And then when it comes to using AI, well, what do we mean by using AI? So there's the Playwright MCP, there's the Playwright CLI. Later on here, I mention on one of my later notes here. There's also oh, I don't mention here. Anyways, there's also the playwright skills that can be brought in, or you can create your own skills using Context 7. And so I'm going to go over all that in this video. Okay, so I will put the notes if people want them in the video notes. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just do if you wanted to use playwright using oops you can do it this way. You would using up a lot of tokens for a good no good reason if I did it that way. So here I am in the terminal. I'll just run the the normal code generation tool that's out there here now. All right, so I just paused for a second there, wait for it to spin up. So this is just an application I have. I have it on GitHub. It has a bunch of AI capabilities in it. It's just I won't go through what the application does, but just know that this is the application I want to test. So of course, here's the recorder, and I can record, do things with the recorder. And so yeah, it's just some neat things there. So that's not what this video is going to be about, though. So instead, what this video is going to be about is, yeah, using use lightly, or maybe not, the Playwright MCP. Playwright CLI is another option. And in these notes here itself, when would you use the MCP versus the CLI? So first of all, you might not use either very much, but if you do, the CLI is the much more lightweight version of doing those things. And I think I'll show that in a bit here. And MCP a little bit heavier. There's some other things that it can actually do that the CLI perhaps doesn't do as good, but just know there are a couple options here. So how might I start using just AI just in general? Well, I might have say I'm new to the project, right? And I just want to do some exploratory looking around to see what I should create tests with. So in this case, I'm just saying I'm new to the project. I want to create end-to-end tests with Playwright, summarize possible pages and where they're defined, write down investigative results to this markdown file within this particular folder. So I'm just going to kick that off. And so you'll start to see here momentarily in this docs folder um, some information, a markdown file that will get created. So I'm just going to pause the video. So after a little bit of work, I came up with this markdown file. So why would you want to do this? Well, this is kind of, get one possible reason is to, upfront do some investigative work. And so this is going to be some instructions for some things that you could look at testing, right? So I have this thing called a timeline landing page, a search page. Most websites have that, a story mode. Um, Anyways, lots of ideas here for things to test, and it kind of gives a start to be instructions of how you might do that. Okay, so now let me just start a new chat window, or I'll just clear the context of this one. Actually, yeah, there we go. So now I can choose. Maybe I want to use the Playwright CLI, so I could say, navigate to this URL using the Playwright CLI and determine core functionality, create an end-to-end testing plan. Do not create any code yet. Use the information in this markdown file and include the 3 actionable test scenarios. So I could run it that way, or VS Code now has this integrated browser, and so I could say use the VS Code integrated browser. So I'm just going to kick that off. And so what you'll start to see here momentarily, which is pretty neat. I'm just going to keep that file, which is pretty neat. It's going to kick open a browser session within VS Code. If people haven't seen this yet, you're about to see it occur here. So there it is here. Yeah, so it kicked off the browser session, and I think you're going to see it in action. Now, this obviously would be equivalent to a headed mode of a a testing tool like Playwright, but so maybe you don't want to do that. But in this case, I just kind of want to see it in action, see it kind of click around, determine what might be some good things to test. So yeah, I'm just going to let it do its work. And it keeps on going. It just did a search on terminology of Copilot there, got some search results. And I should just say this application itself, the idea behind it is that you see a news headline that's out there, and you want to keep it, you want to store it to your own personal repository of interesting articles. You can put tags on it. You can use AI to generate summaries. You can then create a story of all of those interesting things that you've accumulated over the years into a story. You could filter that story, use AI to generate it. I have integrated GitHub Copilot SDK in that recent developments at the top here, in case people are curious as it's chugging along here. That kind of says, okay, perform a search, gather up the search results, display them in the web browser. Lots of different things you could do. Embed AI directly into your application using different approaches. So either that's the OpenAI SDK, some agent framework, or an agent SDK, Claude SDK, or the Codex SDK, or the GitHub Copilot SDK. And eventually, my thought is that this application, in case you're curious, as this is running, is going to do all that, and then you can kind of swap them out. Is kind of the premise behind here. So, anyways, I'm going to let this finish off. Okay, so it finished, and we can take a look at the plan. Um, and yeah, so it confirmed some core functionality, came up with some ideas for different testing scenarios. So timeline navigation, um, maybe write a Playwright test for that. Search query and results, write a Playwright test for that. So anyways, so kind of neat. And here it's saying, do you want to continue? I'm kind of a big fan of like a brand new context window. Let's do something without cluttering up this one. So I'll just pause for a sec. Okay, so now we got a bunch of ideas, um, for what we could write Playwright tests on. Now you want to create those Playwright tests. So you could just try to do that, and it might be okay. Or create a skill, use some skills, or point to an MCP server. So that has documentation and proper ways to write Playwright tests. So in this case, the very popular one, so a lot of the Microsoft folks refer to this one, is Contact 7. So you can find it here. You can install the Contact 7 MCP server by going to the extensions on the left-hand side in VS Code and get that installed. And then so when you put a prompt in the GitHub Copilot, you can put # Contact 7. Make sure you use Contact 7 when you're about to do things. That is one way. Second way is you can install a skill from skills.sh, and then again that will bring things in to your skills as well. So that's all great. But another way that I find quite interesting is use Contact 7 itself has a way to create skills. So if I do that, I can come over to my terminal and say npx run this skills generator. And now I can say, describe the expertise. So I'm going to say writing Playwright tests in TypeScript. This is a Python project, by the way. I know though locally it's they want to write their tests in Playwright. They're not Python applications. So I mean, maybe you want to stick with Python Playwright. In this case, I have intermixed TypeScript tests along with uh, uh, Python tests, which is that's this other folder here, alongside the Python application. Anyways, so when you do this npx Contact 7 skills generate, it asks you which Contact 7 repository of information do you want to use, and I kind of like this way because this way you could be sure that you're picking what you expect to be picking. Like, so if you just said # Contact 7, which absolutely that works. So far everything is good, but I suppose it's possible that you could suddenly be getting some other uh, documentation that you weren't expecting. So this is being very explicit to create me a skill based off of that knowledge repository, based off of that sentence that I gave that says, yeah, I'm trying to write some Playwright tests. So yeah, so here it's like, what stage of Playwright testing are you focusing on? So you can kind of, pick something your own, enter something your own. Yeah, writing and organizing tests, perfect. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm doing this on a web application. You can do it on web API endpoints, type something yourself. Assertions, interactions, fantastic. And now I'll just let it chug, and then I'll show you out the other side here, what comes out. And now that it's figured out what to do, gathers up what it wanted to write for a skill, I'm going to say to go ahead and install that skill. And that looks good enough for me. So I'll say yes to that. Now, where it just generated it was in this .agent's skills, and interestingly enough, like that's actually fine. Like I could put it, maybe your team for consistency reasons, and there'd be really good reasons to do this is if I just drag this over into the .github, or I could just leave it where it is. And the reason why I can is it actually is kind of interesting. VS Code is very accommodating where those skills can be put. And so if I go into settings, you can see, GitHub skills, yes, skills can be put there. .agents skills, great. .claude skills. And obviously the reason for this is because there's all this tooling out there, and they're trying to be like, yeah, great. If you create a skill, if you import in a skill, we support all these common ways of doing it, because there wasn't obviously an agreed upon standard here. And so there's lots of different ways. So I can just keep it there for now. And then we can just take a look at it. And so what does this skill look like? So that, again, normal skill stuff, there's a name, there's a description, and then here's some things. It's like, yeah, these are best practices. Use the get by role. Don't don't do it by IDs. That's not the way to do it anymore. And it goes on and on and on. So yeah, there's a skill specific to using best practices that are documented by the Microsoft Playwright team, that Contact 7 has crawled, brought in, and then I can use their skill creator to create me a custom skill for it. So now I can finally get to writing my skill. So I could say, for example, here's a Playwright test case scenario. Go to that plan that had a testing scenario, copy and paste this, paste it into here, and then execute the test plan using the Playwright CLI. Once you're done, generate a Playwright test case in folder, whatever, into my particular end-to-end testing folder, include the test plan on top as comments. I could do it that way, or I could actually do the subagent way, and it's like, okay, if all these are different scenarios, why don't I just execute them using multiple subagents? So same sort of thing. Execute each of the test scenarios in here in this file using the Playwright CLI. Once you are done, generate a Playwright test case in whatever folder using new names based on the scenario. Let's put it past tense. Include the test scenario on top as comments. Execute each test scenario and write Playwright test in its own subagent. And so that's kind of the key here. So I'm just going to run that, and this will take a little bit because it's going to kick off and write multiple tests all at once based off of the scenarios mentioned in the plan. And you can see here, as it's executing, it is telling me that, I'm going to locating the TypeScript Playwright skill, and I can generate tests that fit the current setup instead of guessing. And that's that's kind of the key part is it's going to use all the information that I've already gathered up using the skill that was determined. Hopefully, it'll create some tests using all that knowledge in hand, and come up with a decent set of tests. All right, it's still chugging, but interestingly enough, this time, and this is where I probably should re-look at my prompt. This time, it didn't do subagents for each of the generating. A little bit of a surprise there, but I thought it'd be a full disclosure here because AI doesn't always do exactly what I expect it to do. Problem is probably with me, not with the agent itself. Okay, so that's all great, and it created 3 TypeScript tests. And the last thing, of course, you can do is you could then use, in this case, I'll just use Contact 7 directly, and I'll just say, I like this concept of these page object models. Use that and update all my tests to use it. So here's here's an existing test, and we'll see it come out the other end using POMs instead. Okay, there you go. Now I now have POMs for my pages, and I could say keep these changes, and now it's a little bit cleaner looking tests, more readable, hopefully more maintainable. And if I run the show report here and show it, it worked wonderfully with all 3 passing. So that's the video about Playwright, and hopefully it makes a little sense. And And I didn't even cover the Playwright test agents for some other video for another date. That's it for today.